Welcome to Zigmatech Learning Hub. I will be your instructor for agricultural science. For this class, we are going to be taking our exercises from the ExamGuide app. If you don't have the application already installed on your device, I will want you to download the app in order to follow along in this class. ExamGuide is the leading educational app that helps students prepare adequately for various exams like UTME, post-UTME, WAEC, GCE, KCPE, IJMB, JUPEB, Cowbellpedia, BECE, JSCE, NCEE, NECO, to mention a few. You can download the app from www.examguide.com or Google Play Store. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to be updated on new videos. Ready for today's class? Okay, let's get started. Land acquisition has been a challenge in Nigeria. Communities fight over land. Individuals do kill themselves over land. As a result of these problems, the federal government of Nigeria in 1978 decided, or that is during the reign of General Olusegun Obasanjo, to promulgate a decree on land use. So we will get to know more about this in the topic, agricultural laws and reforms. Our topic is agricultural laws and reforms. So by the end of the lesson, you should be able to list and explain the various types of land tenure system. You should be able to state the ways in which land tenure affects agriculture. You should highlight the Land Use Decree of 1978 and also mention the aims of the Land Use Decree. We will also discuss the implications of the Land Use Decree on agricultural development. And finally, we will state the advantages and disadvantages of the Land Use Act, which is also the Land Use Decree. So let's start with this. What is land tenure system? So the term tenure is derived from the Latin word tenere, which means to hold. So it has its origin in the Latin word tenere. So land tenure system also refers to the way land is acquired, held, remember from the word tenere, means to hold. So the way land is acquired, the way land is held, the way land is managed, which could either be for a temporary or for a permanent use. So let's take a look at the definition of land tenure. So land tenure can be defined as a system of ownership, or another word for ownership is acquisition, by an individual. So it could be by an individual, a family, a community, or a government agency, either for temporary or permanent use. So it's a system of land ownership. That's what land tenure system means. And we know that the land tenure system in West Africa varies with the various tribes and the communities and the states that exist. So let's look at the land tenure system in Nigeria. Now, land is the most important asset of every farmer. He needs land for his crop production, for his livestock production as well. And land tenure system in Nigeria can be broadly classified into the following. We have the communal land tenure system and the individual land tenure system. So let's take a look at the communal land tenure system. What is the communal land tenure system? So the word communal is connected to community, group of people. So in this type, the land belongs to the what? Community. And of course, a community could be the family, village or clan, etc. And remember, this community always has leadership, those who head the community. And this could be a chief, could be an oba, could be an obi. That's for the eastern side. The oba should be for the western side too. Then the emir, which is for the northern side, northern region, or Bali. So these are examples of some of the heads of the communities. And these communities heads are the ones that decide the modality for sharing land under the communal land tenure system. Now, the communal land tenure system has its advantages and it also has its disadvantages. So let's take a look at the advantages of the communal land tenure system. Now, in the communal land tenure system, the farmer, it's ideal. They can engage in large-scale farming. There's also what is called cooperative farming, which can be done under the communal land tenure system, where it's a group of farmers coming together to cultivate or rear animals together. Now, the land is also acquired at no cost because it's owned by the community and you're a member of the community, so it's owned at no cost. It also facilitates land development. And finally, every member can also have access to the land. Let's take a look at the disadvantages of the communal land tenure system. Now, since the land is owned by everybody, the land cannot be sold, so sale of land is not allowed. That's on the individual basis because the land is owned by the community. Now, the land cannot be used as a collateral for loans. Now, when it comes to agricultural development, agriculture requires capital, and as a result of this, sometimes the farmer needs some financial support, so he needs to get a loan. But in this case, the land belongs to the community, and so an individual cannot take the land and use it as a means of getting loans from the bank. Also, no permanent crops can be allowed, especially tree crops that take time to mature and grow, like cocoa, oil palm, rubber tree. These are crops that are called permanent crops. They are not allowed because it's owned by the community. Everybody may not be interested in getting involved in that kind of crop production. Then non-indigens too cannot acquire land under the communal land tenure system because they are not members of the community. So they are not entitled to get land in such a community. Likewise, unmarried women too are not allowed, may not be allotted land too under the communal land tenure system. So we're done with the communal land tenure system. Let's take a look at the individual land tenure system. From the word individual, you know that the land is acquired by an individual. Now, under this system of land tenure system, we have different types here. We have land tenure by inheritance. We have leasehold tenure system. We have the gift tenure system. We have the rent tenure system. We have the purchase, also known as the freehold tenure system. And we have tenants at the will of government. So these are the various types of individual land tenure systems. So we're going to look at them, each of them, and get to understand them better. So land tenure by inheritance. And what does this mean? That means the land is acquired or inherited from one's parent or passed from one generation to the other. So this is individual land tenure system by inheritance. It has its advantages and it also has its disadvantages. Now, one of the advantages is that permanent crops can be cultivated under the land tenure by inheritance. And examples of such permanent crops, as I mentioned earlier, like oil palm, cocoa, rubber, cola. Now, the land can also be improved by fertilizer application. That's the fertility of the land can be managed properly and improved upon under the land tenure by inheritance. Now, the land can also be used as collateral to obtain loans from financial institutions. Also, children yet unborn are also provided for under the land tenure by inheritance. It's their right, so they're able to get their own, inherit their own portion of the land as well. Then there's also proper planning and development of the land under the land tenure by inheritance. Just as it has its advantages, so does the land tenure by inheritance also have its disadvantages. Now, one of the disadvantages here is that it leads to excessive land fragmentation. Now, the word fragmentation means pieces broken down into various portions, because remember, a father will probably have many sons and many children, and so each of them will need to get their own inheritance as regards land. So he now has to divide his portion of his land into various portions, so that all his children can obtain at least a piece of land from him. That's fragmentation. That's a disadvantage, especially when it comes to commercial agriculture or large-scale farming. That's a disadvantage. So it leads to excessive land fragmentation. Now, sharing of land is also a delicate issue, and this can also bring about disagreement among the offspring or the siblings, claiming that they should all get equal share of land, and this could lead to some disagreement among the family. So that's another disadvantage of the land tenure by inheritance. There are a lot of restrictions on the land as well, and when it comes to land tenure by inheritance. Now, it's difficult to sell such lands if there are no proper consultations with all members of the family. So they said the sale of the land without proper consultation with the members of the family is not allowed. So the families must agree if that land is to be sold. And some cultures also do not list women as beneficiaries. So some women do not inherit lands from their fathers or from their parents in some cultures. Let's take a look at another land tenure system. Under the individual land tenure system, we have what is called the leasehold tenure system. Now, what does this system entail? It has to do with a contract existing between a person called a leaseor and another person which is called a leasee, for the purpose of leasing a piece of land for a specific period of time of some years, which could be between 5 to 30 years. Now, under this agreement, a sum of money is usually paid for the period of lease. It has its advantages and it also has its disadvantages. So let's take a look at the advantages of the leasehold tenure system. Now, it allows the lessee to have maximum use of the land. He can do what he can make proper use of the land. He can also cultivate some permanent crops. Remember, we said it's for a duration of about 5 to 30 years, so he can cultivate some permanent crops. But it also has its disadvantage. Now, the lessee cannot develop the land beyond the agreement between that's the lessee, and the leaseor, the person who leases out the land. The lessee cannot develop the land beyond the agreement. And he can also not use it as a means of obtaining loans from the bank, because the land does not belong to him. He only leased it for a period of time. And also, another disadvantage here is that a lease agreement of less than 50 years is not really ideal for permanent crop. Yes, we said he could go into permanent crop production, but it's not really ideal if the lease is less than 50 years, because some of these permanent crops take years to mature. For example, cocoa takes some years to mature, like about 3 to 5 years, before it will now start fruiting. Rubber, likewise, takes about 3 to 6 years before it will now start fruiting. Same as oil palm, takes about 3 to 7 years to start before it will mature and start producing fruit. So you can see that when you're dealing with permanent crops, we really need a lot of years. So it's better to own the land when you are talking about getting involved in permanent crop cultivation. Another system of land tenure system in Nigeria we have is what is called land tenure by rent, which is also called tenancy. Now, in this system, the tenant, which is the farmer, pays a certain amount of money to the landlord for a period of time to use the land, and in this case, the duration is just for a short period of time, like 1 to 2 years, as compared to the leasehold system, which is about 5 to 30 years. But in this case, it's about just 1 to 2 years. That's under the land tenure by rent. Okay, it has its advantages and also has its disadvantages. So let's take a look at the advantages of the land tenure by rent, which is also the tenancy system. Here you can, it's good for food crop, or it's ideal for food crop and animal production. And the farmer can also efficiently use and maintain the land for maximum production during the period of rentage. Let's take a look at the disadvantages of the land tenure by rent. Here, the landlord can decide at any point to revoke the tenancy when the rent period expires. He can decide not to rent out his land again to the farmer. Now, the farmer cannot plan well due to uncertainty of the use of the land, since the land doesn't belong to him, so he cannot plan properly to engage in his farming practices. Likewise, the land can also not be used for collateral or as a means of obtaining loans from financial institutions. Land tenure by purchase or freehold. Now, this is another individual land tenure system in Nigeria. Now, in this type, the farmer pays a certain amount of money for a piece of land, and once he pays this money, the land becomes his property. So it's different from rent or leasehold. In this case, he pays money and the land becomes his property. It has its advantages and it also has its disadvantages. So what are the advantages of land tenure by purchase or freehold? Now, the land can be used for both permanent crops and arable crops. The arable crops are food crops. The land can also be used as a means of obtaining loans from financial institutions because the land belongs to the farmer. It can also be used for ranching, that's animal husbandry, like ranching. It can also be developed. The land can also be passed on to the farmer's offspring. It also has its disadvantages, and in this case, the land may be expensive to purchase, and the farmer may also fall into the hands of fraudsters, people who buy land and resell to others, and those are fraudsters. So that's another disadvantage of the land tenure by purchase or freehold. The farmer may not be able to acquire the exact size of land that he needs. That's another disadvantage of the land tenure by purchase or freehold. He may need quite a large portion of land, and he may not be able to acquire exactly the size he needs for his agricultural engagement. Now, mechanized farming is also not possible if the land is small. So if the farmer is able to get a small piece of land in this case, and he may not be able to practice what's called mechanized farming, the use of machines on his farmland because of the land size. We have another land tenure system under the individual land tenure system called land tenure by free gift or pledge. And from the word gift, you should understand that it's something that was received freely, free of charge. So this type of land tenure system is one in which the land is donated or given out of goodwill or free of charge in appreciation or as an incentive. It has its advantages and also its disadvantages. So let's take a look at the advantages. It said the new owner can make maximum use of the land for whatever production purpose he decides to get involved in. And it's irredeemable. Once he has gotten it as a gift, the owner cannot take it back. So a gift is irredeemable. Permanent crops can also be grown in this type of land tenure system, and also animals too. Keeping of animals too is allowed. Now it can also be used as a means of obtaining loans from financial institutions. It also has its disadvantages. Let's take a look at the disadvantages of the land tenure by free gift or pledge. Now in this case, you can see the land given out, if the land is given out unwisely, could also bring about some disagreement between the offsprings. Those are the offsprings of the owner of the land, initial owner of the land, who gave it out as a gift. The children or the offspring may not be happy with that decision if it was done unwisely. Now, another disadvantage is that the true ownership can be challenged if there are no proper documentations as regards the ownership of that land. It could be challenged, and that gift, you could end up losing it if it's found out that the person who gave you the land is not the rightful owner of the land. We have what is called tenants at the will of government, which is another land tenure system in Nigeria that's under the individual land tenure system. Now, in this system, the government acquires large areas of land, and when the government acquires these large areas of land, a farmer or any farmer who wishes to make use of this land or a portion of the land pays just a token for the use of a piece or a plot within that a specified period of time to carry out his farming practices. It has its advantages and it also has its disadvantages. So what are the advantages? It said the poor and the rich can have access to the land because they just pay a little token to get access to a portion or a piece of the land which is owned by the government. Then women can also, in this case, there's no gender bias here. Women can be given land to carry out their farming practices as well. And it's also very ideal for aggressive food production. A lot of food production can be obtained from this system of land ownership. Land in this case is also cheap to acquire. Remember, they just pay a little token to the government in order to obtain a portion or a plot to cultivate their crops or to rear their animals. And the land can also be improved by way of fertilizer application under the tenants, this system of land ownership, which is tenants at the will of government. Let's take a look at the disadvantages of this land tenure system. Here, there could be too much bureaucracy, which is also known as red tape. That means difficulty in documentations before you're able to get a portion or being allotted or allocated a portion of the land. There could be a lot of documentation, a lot of difficulty, which is called bureaucracy. So that's a disadvantage. And the land can be revoked. If tenants fail to pay, the government can decide to revoke and take the land back from the farmer. Now, such lands can also not be used as collateral to obtain loans from financial institutions, and also under this system, permanent crops cannot be cultivated on the land. Remember, the land does not belong to the farmer, so he will use it for a short period of time and return it back, let go of it, back to the government. So permanent crops, which take a long time to mature, cannot be cultivated on such land. Let's look at the ways in which the land tenure system affects agricultural production. Generally, all the land tenure systems, the communal, the individual, under the individual we have different types by the tenants at the will of government, and the land tenure by rentage, by rent, you understand, land tenure by inheritance, by gift or pledge. These various land tenure systems, how do they affect agricultural production? Now, one, we have, they may lead to fragmentation of land. That's the land breaking down into pieces, being given in pieces, especially under the land tenure by inheritance, which may not be ideal for mechanized farming. Then the correct ownership of some plots may not also be determined. So we're looking at the ways in which the various land tenure system affects agricultural production generally. So the land can also may not be used as collateral for loans in some of the tenurial system, especially those that fall under tenants at the will of government, land ownership by land tenure system by rent, may not be used or cannot be used as a means of obtaining loans from the financial institutions. Then large-scale farming cannot be practiced on small scattered holdings, especially under the land tenure by inheritance, where the farmland is broken down into various portions for the various offsprings of the farmer. So large-scale farming cannot be practiced on small-scale holding or small scattered holdings. Then strangers are also prevented from owning land, and this cannot come, and that means they cannot come to develop the land because they're not members of the community, especially under the communal land tenure system. Now, they said because of the short tenancy period in some systems, we cannot carry out, or the farmer cannot carry out permanent land improvement programs. So that's another way it can affect agricultural production. Now, there's often the restriction of the type of crops. Talking about permanent crops, they cannot be grown in certain land tenure systems. Remember, for example, tenants at the will of government, which is a land tenure system. The farmer pays a token to get a portion of land. The land does not belong to him, so he cannot cultivate permanent crops. Some landowners may not have the intention of farming, while those willing to farm may not be able to do so because of the tenure system. Some people may, especially the freehold or the purchase, the farmer may buy the land, he may not have the intention of going into farming, while some who have the intention may not be able to own the land. So that's another effect of the tenure system on agricultural production. And some landowners also exploit those without land by giving unfavorable tenancy conditions. That's another effect. Now, production is usually very high on land obtained by purchase or by freehold. Why is this so? Because the farmer can carry out some land improvement on the farmland obtained. He could work on the fertility, he could carry out some farming practices like crop rotation, and all of this could help to improve the fertility of the soil or of the land, thereby leading to high production. The Land Use Act, which is also called the Land Use Decree of 1978, has also helped to make more land available to farmers for large-scale production. Now, the acquisition of land through the freehold is usually expensive, and as a result of this can discourage agricultural investors. So we have just looked generally at how the various land tenure system affects agricultural production. Let's go to the Land Use Decree or the Land Use Act of 1978. Now, what is this? The Land Use Act, it was promulgated, that was signed into law by the Federal Military Government of Nigeria in March 29, 1978. And the purpose of this Land Use Act or Land Use Decree was to take care of all the inadequacies inherent in land ownership in Nigeria. Now, let's take a look at the decree and know exactly what the decree states. Now, it says all land, talking about the decree now, all land in Nigeria is vested in the federal government. That means the land is owned by the federal government to be held in trust for the people. Also, the decree states that all rights to allocate land is vested on the state government. So the state government has the right to allocate lands. That means the state government is empowered to act on behalf of the federal government in allocating land. And the state governor or any person delegated by the governor is the one who can issue certificate of occupancy, which is popularly called C of O, to any individual. So when you hear of the word or the acronym C of O, it means certificate of occupancy. So the state governor or any person delegated by the governor is the one who can issue the certificate of occupancy. The decree also states that adult Nigerians, which are about 21 years old or above, have the right to acquire land. And also, the period of ownership of land will not exceed 99 years. So after 99 years, the land will revert back to the government. And it also states that farmers should not be allocated more than 500 hectares for crop production or 5,000 hectares for grazing purposes. That's for animals, cattle, sheep, goats, grazing purposes. Let's take a look at the aims of the Land Use Decree. What's the aim of the Land Use Decree? One, it encourages proper productive and efficient use of land. So it will encourage the efficient use of our arable lands in Nigeria. And it allocates lands and creates opportunities for farmers, those enterprising farmers who need more land, who need to acquire more land for large-scale farming. So with the land use decree, they are able to achieve that. Then there's also planning of programs for particular land use, or the formation of programs for particular land. The land use decree facilitates the planning or the formation of programs for a particular land use. It also simplifies the management of land or the ownership of land in the country. So it streamlines it and makes it simple to own land and to manage land in the country. Then also controversies that go alongside with land are also taken care of by the land use decree. Okay, let's take a look at the implications of the Land Use Act for agricultural development. Now, one of the implications here is that it ensures that whoever requires land for any purpose will be given or has the ability to make optimum use of it, and also has the ability to make optimum use of the land will always obtain it. Now, as a result of this helps to ensure that enough land is being made available for agriculture as well as for industries. Now, with the land use decree, individual ownership of the land, whether the land is developed or not, or undeveloped, will cease. And now, in this case, the only relationship between the individual and the land is that of use. So we're looking at the implications of the Land Use Act for agricultural development. Now, another implication here is that it rationalizes the land laws, and this helps to facilitate rapid economic and social transformation in Nigeria. It also creates incentives for the development by making land easily available for farmers or easily available to farmers. Now, the decree does not dispossess any farmer or any Nigerian of his acquired property which he or she has been lawfully or optimally used or acquired. It also allows any individual that is above the age of 21 years to apply for the certificate of occupancy, which is C of O, and also land ownership, and also to own lands. Let's look at the advantages of the land use decree. It has its advantages and it also has its disadvantages. So we'll start by looking at its advantages. Now here you can see that land acquisition is made easy as a result of the land use decree. Farmers or people who are interested in obtaining land, especially for agricultural purposes and for other uses, or industries can easily acquire land. Now people can acquire land outside their locality. Remember, there was the case of, especially under the land tenure by inheritance, where you're not a member of the community, you cannot obtain, communal land tenure system, where if you're not a member of the community, you cannot obtain land or benefit from the land, the community. In this case, the land use decree has been able to take care of that. So people who are outside a particular locality, tribe or state, can always obtain land anywhere in Nigeria. And it has also helped to take care of the issue of court cases as regard land ownership. So the land use decree has been able to bring about a reduction in court cases as regard land ownership. It has also made large land holdings available, which is very needful or helpful for large-scale agricultural practices or agricultural farming. It has also facilitated the borrowing of capital for further investment, because with the land use decree, people are able to own land individually, and as a result of this, they can use it as a means or as a collateral for obtaining loans from financial institutions for further investment in agriculture. And it also prevents fragmentation of land, that's breaking of land giving of land into smaller pieces, because under this system, that's the land use decree, Any land that is acquired here cannot be shared into bits. Now, there's also the reduction in boundary disputes, especially between communities, people claiming the land belongs to this community, this land tussle. So why is this achievable, or why has this problem been solved? Is because of the issue of survey. So land survey is a mandatory act as regards obtaining or getting ownership of a land. So the land survey is mandatory for you to have occupancy rights being granted to you as an individual. Now let's take a look at the disadvantages of the land use decree. I've talked about the advantages, it also has its disadvantages. Now it has led to an increase in the cost of land survey. Remember, you cannot be given a certificate of occupancy or right of ownership without land survey done. So this has led to an increase in the cost of surveying. Then there's also bureaucracy, that's the red tape issues, difficulties getting land acquisition. You understand? Getting documents, that's the certificate of occupancy, the bureaucracy in getting your land approved, your ownership approved, is also one of the challenges or disadvantages of the land use decree. And the land is not necessarily allotted to every potential agricultural developer. So it's not everybody that is actually interested in agriculture that is being able to get the land he or she requires. Now, the land may be acquired by influential people for non-agricultural purposes. As I said earlier, it's not everybody that may be interested in getting involved in agriculture. So some of the influential people who have the finance to buy a lot of land may buy it for some other purposes which are outside the agricultural sector. And also it has impoverished communities whose main assets are land. So those communities that their assets, that's those what they have as their value is their land, and this land has been taken from them. So it can lead to some poverty in such communities. Now it has also encouraged dishonesty through illegal sales and backdating of ownership or title deeds of our land, of the land, after the 1978 decree, when it was now promulgated. That's the land use decree was promulgated. Okay, so far we've talked about extensively on the land tenure system. So in this lesson, we talked about the types of the land tenure system in Nigeria, which are the communal and the individual land tenure system. And under the individual land tenure system, we have inheritance, leasehold tenure system, freehold or purchase tenure system, to mention a few. We also talked about the land use decree of 1978. We looked at its implications, and we said one of the implications there is that it has led to efficient use of land. There's also opportunities for farmers to acquire more land as a result of the land use decree. We also looked at the advantages of the land use decree and also the disadvantages. And under the advantages, we said land acquisition is made easier. You know, people are also able to acquire land outside their locality. It has also made available large land holdings, which has helped to encourage large-scale agriculture. We also looked at the disadvantages, and one of the disadvantages is that it has caused an increase in land survey, and there's also bureaucracy in land acquisition. That's difficulty, especially for signing of documents to get your C of O in acquiring land. And land is not necessarily allotted to every potential agricultural developer, just to mention a few. So far, I believe we've learned quite a lot today, so we're going to take a look at some questions so that we can understand our knowledge base on this topic so far. Starting with the year 2019. Okay, this question says, an advantage of communal land tenure system is that it encourages use of land for permanent projects by individuals. That's a disadvantage, that's not an advantage. B, it makes land cheap to acquire. C, it leads to fragmentation. D, it does not promote farm mechanization. The answer here is B, it makes land cheap to acquire. That's the only advantage here. The others are disadvantages. The answer here is B, makes land cheap to acquire. So let's go to 2018 and answer another question. So the land tenure system which involves the outright purchase of land is A, the leasehold, B, communal, C, freehold, D, inheritance. The answer is C, freehold. Let's go to the year 2017 and answer another question. Okay. This question says, which of the following statement is not a problem associated with land tenure system through inheritance? A, family members have small holdings, not the road buildings there. The question should be land holdings and not buildings. Then B, family members have right to free use of land. C, non-family members cannot inherit land. And D, farm mechanization is restricted. Remember, the question says, which of the following statement is not a problem? That means it's an advantage. So looking at it closely, you see family members have small land holdings is a problem. Family members have right to free use of land. That's not a problem there. So the answer is B. But looking at the others, non-family members cannot inherit land. That's a problem. Farm mechanization is restricted. That's also a problem. So the answer here is B. Family members have right to free use of land. So let's go to 2016 to answer another question. This question says, the document given to a farmer on acquiring a piece of land from the government is called A, certificate of purchase, B, receipt of ownership, C, certificate of occupancy, and D, receipt of lease. Remember when I taught you, I talked about C of O, which is certificate of occupancy. So the answer is C, certificate of occupancy. Then let's take another question from 2015. And this question states that a piece of land is said to be on lease to a farmer when it is A, given as compensation, B, purchased on credit, C, rented for a period, and D, given as a gift. The answer is C, rented for a period. Thank you for participating in today's class. You can practice more questions using the ExamGuide app. The app scores and gives a detailed explanation of all the questions at the end of your practice test. You can learn a particular topic of interest with different modes like study mode, mock mode, and practice mode. It also has other features that make learning fun. It is a must-have for all serious students. Download from www.examguide.com if you don't have it yet. See you in the next class. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and share the video to people that would benefit from it.